The highly anticipated brand new horse game Legend of Khiimori has dropped its demo, and it's a game. Legend of Khiimori is a game being developed by Archery Interactive and a whole bunch of other companies. Holy damn! Officially, it will be releasing into early access in November. But we have been given a taste of this game via a demo, and honestly, it feels like we were handed the wrapper instead of the candy. The idea is there, but it's more like a string of systems rather than a cohesive experience. I'm going to have to explain. For this video, I'm going to be giving my opinion on the demo. I will of course keep in mind that this is still a work in progress and the full release for this title will only be available in around a year. So there is a lot of work still to be done and things could change. Also, I won't be mentioning the bugs. It's a moot thing to bring up when the game is still in development. And of course, thank you to my Ko-Fi supporters for being more awesome than finally being officially moved in. I am very happy. Let's get into it. The Legend of Khiimori is a system-driven game where you explore the untamed land of 13th century Mongolia as a brave courier rider. Breed and train horses with specialized abilities to explore every aspect of this diverse and fascinating landscape." End quote. Later on, also on the Steam page, it continues. Keep yourself safe from danger by strategically planning your delivery routes across the wide steppes over snowy peaks or through the scorching desert. Enjoy unparalleled realism in lifelike equine behavior and animation, refined and approved by the experts. And finally, surviving is key. Forage and hunt for supplies and materials to mix food and tonics for your horse. Prepare your horse and your equipment to weather harsh environments and conditions. Only then can you survive the untamed Mongolian wilderness. End quote. So this is painting a very specific picture. Adventurous, planning your route, crafting, training, hunting, riding, breeding and taking care of your horse on the steppes of Mongolia. It is selling an experience of a harsh and fascinating journey. And it sounds bloody wonderful. But some of you might be wondering, what is a system-driven game and why is it important? Very good question. System-driven or systemic games just means that everything is driven by variables and interactions to those variables in a worldwide scale. The best and most used example is Zelda Breath of the Wild's weather system. If it rains, Link's footfalls are softer, but it is more difficult to climb because the rocks are slippery. It also creates off-script moments, like lightning killing an enemy during a thunderstorm, or a dragon swooping down during a bandit raid like in Skyrim. Although not a new concept by any stretch of the imagination, systemic games have become exceedingly popular today for players especially, as those surprises create very personalized experiences in-game. But I will add to this, system-driven has become a buzzword. We won't be able to tell if Khiimori is a truly system-driven game by the demo alone. We'll have to wait for the early access to really be sure. But let's get into the demo review proper. So, we begin our journey at a campsite where we are given a quick brief rundown of who we are and what our purpose is. We are a yam or courier rider. Our goal is to deliver goods, parcels, letters, etc. Basically, we are part of the Mongolian Pony Express, so we need a horse, and our horse is called George. I'm calling him George. George and I set off to the yam station to start our journey as a courier, and almost immediately we are met with our first major problem. The animations are wrong. They don't look good. They feel stiff, uneven, like the horse is being pulled back and thrust forward simultaneously. For everyone's information, a horse in motion cannot move backwards while moving forwards. Archery Interactive did the exact same thing with Emerald Valley Ranch's horses. I didn't say anything back then because I wanted to have one positive thing in that bloody review. But yes, this seesawing is driving me nuts because it means the momentum is going backwards and forwards, which is impossible. Please learn Newton's laws of physics, that would be lovely. But their promise to enjoy unparalleled realism in lifelike equine behavior and animation refined and improved by experts is already on rocky ground, because this just doesn't look good. This isn't realistic at all. This is making my brain hurt. Now, I will say they do save it with the horse behavior. The horse bucks, pulls its ears back when upset, limps when wounded, stretches, chews, scratches, grazes, and has realistic horse behavior animations. I will also add that I love the model of the horse. I'm a big fan of Mongolian horses, and this makes me so happy. The horse is not entirely spoiled, but it is soured a little by the animation, so we'll have to see how that is refined. However, very sadly, the visual issues do not end at the poor animations. We're also met with gaudy Unreal Engine-style graphics, which breeds a deep-seated dread in me for this game's future optimization status, meaning it more than likely won't be optimized, because that has become the norm for Unreal Engine games, and wouldn't you know it, I had no choice but to lower the graphical quality because the game was tearing so badly. So right off the bat, we already don't have a great first impression. To be absolutely fair on the visual, just because I had to lower the quality doesn't mean the graphics are terrible. But it does mean that most people will experience the subpar visual like I did, because very few people will have a PC strong enough to play it at the higher end. I want to remind everyone, I do have a decent PC, and I couldn't play it at its highest quality because it kept tearing. But it's early days for the visual, and it can still change, so let's rather get into the gameplay. So, you use one button to speed up the horse, a different one to slow it down. You use WASD or analog stick to move the horse, and another button to sprint. And you can also jump. It is very simple, but it is a little clunky. I tried both with controller and keyboard, and on both the horse just feels heavy. It doesn't feel snappy and quick like a horse should. These are extremely agile animals, and I don't know why so many developers make horses feel like motorbikes on gravel. Just capture the feeling of riding a horse. That's all you have to do. You don't have to animate the horse perfectly, just make it feel like I'm riding a horse. I mentioned this in my Equinox video, but I'm going to mention it here again. In the development for Shadow of the Colossus, the developers went out to ride horses to ensure they understood how it felt to ride a horse. Why is this element for Shadow of the Colossus so important? Because art is not about copying. It is capturing the essence of what you are trying to convey. Any animator worth their salt will tell you to truly convey motion and life in animation, you sometimes need to warp and mold the models into something strange. This is called squash and stretch. You do this to trick the viewer's brain. As an example, you might stretch a horse's leg minutely to give the impression of speed. Or you might widen the eyes to impart fear. Animators don't follow movement or motion to a T. They learn how movement works. And then they try to convey the feeling of that movement onto paper. It is as much understanding as it is creative. Now, of course, I understand gameplay is not animation, but I do wish developers will take animator philosophy to heart. Don't copy, convey. But how would you do that? How would you ever bring to life a horse in a player's hands? By getting your ass onto a horse and riding it. Understand, then convey. Or, if you're lazy like me, go and play Tales of Rain Ravine. But moving on. For my first quest, I am asked to find a man who has lost his way, and we can finally experience the part of the game I was most interested in, choosing my route. This was a large part of the marketing. We are young riders, and the terrain will be difficult, so we must choose the roads we take and plan our routes accordingly. Wonderful. I slap down a few markers and hop on my steed who has become stuck on a rock. I reset George the Sticky and gallop towards the horizon. And I gallop fast like the wind. I propel across the open steppes, the wind chasing me, the birds slicing through the air above me, lending me their wings. George gallops, ripping over the earth. His stamina burns up, his lungs burn up from the dashing too long, but I push forward. George dies. Or faints, like a damsel in a 50s vampire movie. I awake back at the Yam station and rename my horse George the Frail. I climb back on again and ride towards the first marker, this time taking it slower. Really slower, like very slow. My horse trots most of the time to conserve energy. When I canter, my stamina is eaten up. When I gallop, my stamina is eaten up. And when the stamina is gone, my horse's health goes down and it will faint again. At one point, I realized that the horse also does not slow down while in a gate. I put down the controller and watch for a few minutes. He doesn't waver from his path nor slows down. Riveting gameplay. I can already hear the comments telling me that this is how travel games work, Rattle. This constant forward motion is meditative, and that is the point of the game. It is cozy. Stop being so mean. I'm not arguing that. Good, I'm turning into a Brit. I'm not arguing that. What I am arguing is that it doesn't have to be boring. People have often compared Khiimori's base game concept to Death Stranding. I have done so myself. They are both courier games and the terrain is part of the challenge. But I will not use Death Stranding for this argument. I will use Sunless Sea to make my point. I have spoken of Sunless Sea in the past. It's a game I very much treasure. The gameplay consists of you sailing, exploring the ocean, discovering islands, completing tasks, speaking to inhabitants, finding crew, and specifically surviving. You have 3 elements to keep in mind: fuel, supplies, and sanity. Every time you set off into the deep, all three will begin to dwindle. Without being told, you are planning routes, marking locations, remembering ports that sell fuel at reasonable prices, noting light points to save the minds of your sailors. Monsters slither and swim beneath the murk, and you learn quickly not all ports are friendly. At its deepest core, Sunless Sea is a resource management game. As a result, the journey becomes one of tension, constantly checking, hoping, praying you're going the right way. Even if you're in the middle of nowhere, supplies gone and fuel burning away, you can still send out a bat to see if there is hopefully a port nearby, a salvation to stop you from sinking into the deep. This is a journey game made on a small budget by a small team. But now, why do I feel that Sunless Sea works and Khiimori doesn't? Very simply, one creates tension, the other friction. In both games, the vessel, horse and ship will keep moving forward until you switch it out to a slower gear or bringing it to a stop. In both games, we have a meter going down representing the fuel or stamina of our vessel. But in one, my planning is essential. Moving forward is essential for survival. In the other, my planning is extra. Moving forward is needed to reach the next point. Furthermore, in one, I am constantly pushing forward, in the other, I am constantly being interrupted. In Khiimori, I have an extra element. I have to manage my horse. I have to think about its energy, its feed, its hooves, its dirtiness, its health. As a result, I am less enjoying the journey and more babysitting an animal who will pass out after a short gallop. When I am not pushing, I am waiting for the bar to fill up. At a trot or a walk, it goes slowly. At a standstill, it's a bit better, but then I'm standing still. And waiting for a bar to fill up becomes tedious and eventually boring. By some, this style of gameplay could be considered cozy, but as a person who sometimes remembers to talk to me once said, cozy should not equal boring. Now, I do understand why the developers made the game this way. The size of the world is limited, so they have to make the world feel large. The way they do that is by jippoing the horse, weakening it, and forcing the player to slow down to make the journey feel longer. But players who are not captured by the world and story will find other things to occupy their minds. In my case, whenever the horse lost all of its stamina after sprinting, I jumped off the horse and started running on the ground, calling the horse to come up behind me. I don't know if it went faster, but it was gratifying to see the bar fill up quicker, and I felt like I took control back from just sitting on a horse and watching it move forward while the bar slowly crept up. The journey part of this game was, to put it mildly, a great disappointment. I actually would suggest take a page out of endurance riders' books and allow us to grab the reins and trot alongside the horse for short periods. Riders do that to give a horse a break, especially uphill. Now, in the original Kickstarter trailer, they did show something similar, that you are trotting in front of the horse. Since then, I couldn't remember seeing the rider run alongside the horse again, but I do hope they bring it back, as it was quite nice to be able to do that. It gave me some control back into the game. In short, the journey felt tedious, and this wasn't helped by the waypoints. As games become larger and larger, they develop an interesting problem. They need to guide us through large worlds, and the way they do that are with quest markers. As a result, players are often focused on the quest markers and missing out on the world. Legend of Khiimori has essentially decided to take the quest marker and make it our sole objective. I don't know what the hell they were thinking, because 90% of my gameplay is just watching the numbers go down on the quest marker. It's soul-crushing and probably the laziest way they could have developed this game. Just drop in waypoints. How thrilling. But we must continue the story and see how the rest of the game plays out. I realize that the person I have to find is not as far as I thought. It's at this point that I ignore my waypoints and run straight towards him through the mud, and George the Frail shits himself because mud is difficult. Now, this is an example of the terrain will affect your journey. I like it. It does feel like the mud has a definite effect on the horse. However, I didn't feel like it had an effect on the parcels. Sometimes the parcels can get damaged, but honestly, I just stuck to the roads or, just took it slowly and nothing really happened. It didn't feel like a tension point, it just sort of felt like something extra tacked on. Anyway, I find the lost man. He has in turn lost his bag. This is turning into a fetch quest, which in hindsight makes sense for a courier game, but we cannot get back the pack until we chase the bear. I am told to make a dung bomb. They call it an animal repellent. It's made with cloth and animal dung. It's a dung bomb. Before I challenge the bear to mortal combat, I am told George is hungry. I give him some cherries, they do jack shit, then I take him to the water and he drinks. He also eats some grass, which was pretty cool. The fact that the horse can easily replenish itself is not only realistic but also smart from a gameplay perspective. It eases some of the burden of babysitting. Now the horse care system is fine. You can brush your horse, pick its hooves, feed it, water it and give it a pet. These are quick, simple animations and they haven't outstayed their welcome yet. I will say though, feeding the horse is a bit of a drag. I have to select the horse, select the feed, select how much I want to feed, and then I can feed the horse. It's a little annoying, I hope they smooth this out. But now, with George the Frail energized, I race towards the bear. And here's what happens. Can anyone tell me what the hell just happened? My horse is wounded and I like the limping. I love when horses get injured in games. More of this, please. More agony for horses in games. And more dead horses. That would be lovely. I get back to the old man, hand over his pack and set off to the next quest marker, which is at a fisherman. Once again, I choose my route. Not that I followed the first one, but I am hopeful I'll at least try this time and start limping. George the Frail is living up to his name. I continue to limp. And limp. I am told the horse is injured. He needs to be bandaged. I did not take a bandage, so this is my life now. George is still limping. With no bandage and no way to make a bandage, no animals to shoot for animal fat, I quit the game. And I have to start the entire experience from the start. Just brilliant. But it did teach me a lesson, make sure I have bandages. Just to pause here for a moment, after replaying the game, I am wondering if this situation was possibly a bug. Because later on, after I replayed, the horse could actually gallop even with a limp. But the issue in this case still remains. I could not acquire animal fat to craft a bandage to help the horse. And the mood kept dropping, and the further the mood dropped, the chances were great that the horse would faint. So my only course of action was really to reset. This is just an example of either the potential pitfalls the gameplay has, or how incomplete the demo experience currently is. We will have to wait for the full experience to know. Now I complete the bear quest again and finally get to that next spot by the fisherman. I pick up the parcel and this is where I learn about my archery. This was another huge part of the marketing. You need to protect and defend yourself with either your trusty bow or piles of dung. The archery is fine. When you aim your bow and arrow, time slows down. It's, like I say, fine, but it does take away some of the tension because, time slows down, so I have a lot of time to aim and shoot. But I do manage to kill a rabbit in the game. The main reason they teach you about the bow, though, is for this area. This is the danger zone. You have to kill the snakes to get to the chest and open it. Great. But I will say, although I liked the concept, it was a little anticlimactic, which is basically a problem for the game in general. The bear felt like a chaotic situation, but with no tension, because I didn't know what the hell was going on. And here in the background, you can see me slowly kill the wolves. Because remember, time slows down. Combat is not great is what I'm saying. It has no thrill because your focus is just aiming and shooting. I really wish that people will try to make archery more interesting in games. But now I can talk about the weight system. Your horse has 2 saddlebags, and what you're trying to do is balance out what you have in your pack to ensure your horse is not struggling to carry it. Everything you pick up will contribute to the weight. This is a really nice gameplay element, and I think it could be a lot of fun to organize the packs and make sure the horse is optimally loaded. This at least makes the game feel like a journey game, or at least you're planning a little bit for the journey. And now the grind begins. For the demo, to be fair, you are being given a multitude of parcels and messages to deliver. This will be the core gameplay loop. Pick up a parcel, write to the person, hand it over, pick up another parcel, rinse and repeat. Describing it like this is perhaps unfair, as I can very easily describe Death Stranding in the exact same way, and many would say I am doing it a disservice. So, am I doing this game a disservice? Does it offer more? In theory, yes. But in its current state, no. At this point, the systems that are supposed to make the game feel like a system-driven game aren't fleshed out enough to really have impact. Parcels can get damaged, but if you stick to the road, you're fine. You can set waypoints down for your journey, but if you stick to the road, you're fine. You can prepare for your journey by buying food, but the horse can eat happily in the field. At the very least, if you don't have a bandage, you're pretty screwed. But it all seems frivolous. I can bypass a lot of the game, and at the same time, I can't bypass others, which make it stumble and stutter, like the horse care and galloping for more than 250 meters. About the only thing that really felt like it had any impact was the snow and the cold, and I loved this section. It felt like I was battling the ice and snow, like I was pushing through something harsh. This made it feel like a journey. And how do you combat this weather? By giving your horse a tonic, which I feel is a bit of a cop-out. I mean, the game says the weather is challenging, but if I just keep popping potions, is it really a challenge? I would have to play more, of course. But at this point in time, it just feels like snapping my fingers to make the challenge go away. A friend of mine told me of Silksong, where in a specific area your character can get cold. To survive this area, you can use lamps or warm points where your character can warm up. You can also get a coat that will keep out the cold. The point is, there are many ways you can get around gamifying a feature in your game while still keeping a player immersed. Perhaps let us buy a cold-tolerant breed, and we can't deliver parcels in that area until we have that horse. Same with the hot area. Let us buy a hot-tolerant breed to be able to ride freely in that area. In Red Dead Redemption, for example, your clothing determines how cold you were. A simple mechanic, but it makes sort of sense, and you are automatically planning for the area by putting on clothes that are warmer. There are a lot of ways to approach weather and survival in a game, but a tonic is really uninspired, especially in this game, where they are so focused on this element of survive the elements. And now I just briefly want to talk about the Mongolian setting. I'm still unsure why it's set in Mongolia, to be quite frank. Although I see the tents and the clothing and the Mongolian horses, I don't feel the culture yet. I don't feel anything beyond a thin coat of paint that is a quote-unquote Mongolian game. Beyond the visual, there isn't anything that is immersing me into the culture. I will say that the setting is unique, no one can argue that, but the problem with unique settings is it's up to the developer to make them feel like something special. And as of now, I don't feel that. Beyond my wardrobe, I could really be picking berries in Timi anywhere. I could be delivering parcels anywhere. I don't feel like I'm part of the world, I feel like I am a visitor, perhaps a tourist. The story, narrative, or other elements could change this, but as of now, this just doesn't feel like a game among Mongolia. It feels like a game with Mongolian-style assets. One thing I did really like, though, was the voice actor when she used Mongolian words to talk to her horse. I would actually suggest anything that is spoken should be in Mongolian. Have the text be in English so that we can understand, but everything else, when there's spoken words, especially when we're riding across the steppes, let us speak Mongolian. I think it would be such a cool thing, because beyond the fact that it would immerse me, I might actually learn a word or two. Overall, the experience was a mixture of seeing what they're going for and utter boredom. I didn't find it fun watching the horse run while doing nothing, and this happens a lot, but I found the concept intriguing. Like the idea of having hills and mud make my route more difficult and planning around those obstacles, but honestly, it didn't feel like it mattered, and if it did, it just felt like a hindrance and less like a gameplay challenge. There was no tension, just annoyance. At the end of the day, my experience boiled down to running towards the quest marker and dealing with the obstacles as they arose. The route planning did little more than adding waypoints to a map, which turned the Yam route into a Waypoint Simulator. I didn't really care what was going on around me, I just wanted to reach the quest marker and drop the damn parcel off as quickly as possible. The world didn't pull me in as well as it should have, because for one it was broken, for another it just wasn't a nice world to be in. It felt so generic and boring, and the Unreal Engine graphics did nothing to help this. And again, I was too focused on quest markers and waypoints. I will say, once or twice I saw some glimpses of the atmosphere, and it hit well. At times I felt myself settle into the Mongolian steppes, and taking care of the horse, feeling just a little bit accomplished in doing so. I can briefly briefly feel what they want to do here. Parcels to deliver, the open steppes beckoning adventure and exploration, and your horse, your companion through the vast wilderness. There were moments, but they just weren't bright enough to shine, nor to leave any impact, at least not yet. It felt less like an experience and more like a bunch of systems. It felt like a game, and I always worry when I think of a game as a game and not an experience. There is still a lot that I haven't experienced in this game. You know, the training, the breeding, so all of this might still save the game, or, well, I say save the game, but, you know, make it a much better experience. And now I will hear people scream at me in the comments, this is a demo, and I will and do agree. We must give grace and understand that the final product is still a year away. That's a good amount of time, and a lot could potentially change. However, I must also argue that this is what the developers wanted to show us. This is what they thought was good enough to intrigue us to buy. If it wasn't for the fact that I had to do a review, I would not be buying this game on release. Not now. It is, for me, too broken, too buggy, too clunky, and too empty to be anything more than a beta. And that is fine for a beta. It is fine. For the demo, I don't think this is the first impression they wanted to give us. In my opinion, they should have waited. But, as with all of these games, it still might surprise, and I really see potential here.